saying that blood is thicker than water. In my case, it may as well be. Blood is all that matters. And you, Evan, are lucky that we let you stay. I was adopted when I was 5 years old. The John and Catherine household took me in. They fed me, clothed me, and constantly reminded me that they had saved me. Not that I was an orphan begging on the street, but hear them tell it. You'd think they dragged me out of a Dickensian nightmare. And I was supposed to be eternally grateful that their biological son, Freddie, was showered with unconditional love. My younger brother, Freddie, is 5 years old. My junior, but in every way, the golden child. Charismatic, funny, effortlessly charming. You know the type. The type of guy who could crash a car into a lake and then claim it was your fault for parking too close to the water. He had the magical ability to make people love him. So he couldn't do anything wrong in my parents' eyes. If Freddie failed a test, the teacher acted unfairly. If I received a B+, Evan, we expected more of you, considering what we've done for you. So, yes, the family dynamic was enjoyable. However, life wasn't all bad. I had something that kept me sane, Lassie. Lassie and I had been together 3 years. And if you'd asked me back then, I'd have said she was the one. She was attractive, enigmatic, and slightly unpredictable. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had someone on my side. Almost, because there was one person who completely despised me. Her mother, Margaret. Or, as I refer to her in my head, the queen of passive-aggressive disapproval. From the start, she treated me as if I were a stray dog her daughter had decided to adopt. I could almost see the calculations behind her cold, judgmental stare. Where did this boy come from? What kind of genes does he possess? She never said it outright at first, but I could tell she thought Lassie could perform better. After a few glasses of wine, she finally said it. It was during a family dinner. I was helping to clear the table when I overheard her conversing with Lassie's father. It's not that I don't like Evan, she said with the tone of someone who clearly didn't like Evan. I'm just worried, you know. We don't know his family history. His real parents might have been alcoholics or worse. Mental illness runs in families. You understand. I remember gripping the plate so tightly that I almost snapped it in half. Lassie's father was a reserved individual. He worked as a truck driver and was rarely home. His tired expression said only one thing. Do not touch me, or I will break. So Lassie's father mumbled something non-committal, clearly uninterested in the discussion. But that night, I learned the truth. Margaret didn't simply dislike me. She feared what I might be. So, yes, family is in love. Let's just say my life was a never-ending game of proving my worth. And I had no idea the worst was yet to come. Do you know how in movies, the main character always misses the obvious signs? Like when the music becomes ominous, the camera zooms in, and the audience practically screams at the screen. Do not go in there, you idiot. Yes, that was me. Despite all of my family's baggage, I remained optimistic that love would triumph. I and Lassie were not the same. That we would overcome the odds and demonstrate to everyone, her mother, my parents, and in the universe itself we were meant to be. In retrospect, I was a damn fool. Because, looking back, there were red flags everywhere. It started small. Lassie has always been friendly. She was the type of person who could put everyone at ease. But with Freddie, things were different. She laughed a little too much at his jokes, including the stupid ones, and, believe me, they were stupid. Freddie could say something dumb like, "Why don't skeletons fight each other?" Because they lack courage. And she would howl as if it were the funniest thing she had ever heard. Meanwhile, I could tell a decent joke and get a polite chuckle. Then there were those looks. Little glances that lasted a second too long. A flicker of something in her eyes that I couldn't quite identify but disliked. I told myself I was just imagining things. That I was paranoid. Freddie was simply being Freddie. Charming, playful, and magnetic. Lassie was simply being Lassie. Warm, sociable. I was reading too much into it, right? Then came the night. That should have been a typical, enjoyable family dinner. We were all seated around the table. Me, Lassie, Freddie, my parents. The usual cacophony of conversations overlapping. My mother nags my father about his salt intake, and Freddie tells an exaggerated story about his latest gym adventure. And Lassie. Lassie was enthralled. She had tears in her eyes from laughing so hard at everything Freddie said. I'm no longer a jealous guy. At least, I didn't believe I was. But something about the way she looked at him, the way her hand lightly brushed against his arm as she reached for her glass, made my stomach twist. Then, Freddie, the comedian, leaned back in his chair and smirked at me. Man, if you hadn't met Lassie first, I might have taken my shot. Everyone laughed. I forced a chuckle too, because what else could I do? Call him out. Make it weird. No. I did what I had always done. I let it go. But the uneasy feeling did not go away. And then there was the telephone. Lassie had never been the type to stay glued to her screen. However, this has changed. It had recently become her constant companion. And she texted a lot. At first, I didn't think much about it. Then came the phone calls. "I will be right back," she'd say, entering another room. Just my mother. When I asked who it was, she simply shrugged. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it wasn't. I only knew that for the first time in our relationship. I felt like I was losing her. And I didn't know why. I'd always assumed that when the time came to propose, it would be my decision. I imagined a grand romantic moment driven solely by love and certainty. But instead, I spent Thanksgiving at the Inquisition's house. It began like any other Thanksgiving at my parents' home. Lots of food, forced family bonding, and a constant reminder that Freddie was the golden boy. This year, however, we had special guests, Lassie and her mother, Margaret. Margaret, who had previously barely acknowledged my existence, suddenly decided that this year was the ideal time to begin talking to me. And not just any conversation. The talk. 3 years is a long time, she said, her wine swirling like that of a soap opera villain. Don't you think it's time to make things official? I almost choked on my mashed potatoes. Now I understand. Most men are terrified of commitment. That was not me. I wanted to marry Lassie. I adored her, but the way Margaret said it, it was not a suggestion. It was a mandate. I expected Lassie to laugh, roll her eyes, and tell her mother to chill. But instead, she gave me a small, cautious smile. "Don't put pressure on him, Mom," she said. But it was kind of. "Don't put any pressure on him, that is what I meant." "Yeah, Evan. What is taking so long?" Something about it felt off, as if I was being herded into a decision rather than making it on my own. I still let it go. Perhaps it was just normal mother-in-law behavior. Maybe Lassie was simply being polite. Maybe I was overthinking things. So I did what any reasonable man in love would do. I purchased a damn ring. A week later, after careful planning and a lot of stress, I proposed. It was the perfect moment. A picturesque lake view under the stars, accompanied by candles. The full Hollywood treatment. Lassie cried. We said yes and kissed. It was beautiful. I should have been ecstatic. But there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispering, "Why did it feel like you were following a script?" Still, I ignored it because I adored Lassie. And love triumphs over all, right? Fast forward to the big engagement party. My parents, her mother, and our friends. Everyone was present. Champagne, music, congratulations, all around. And then I saw Freddie. Freddie, who was usually the life of the party, looked away. I am not jealous. Not pleased. It's just off. His cocky grin was gone. Instead, he appeared almost disoriented, as if he had just been punched in the gut but was trying to remain calm. Our gazes met briefly, and I swear I saw something resembling fear flash across his face. But before I could process it, he gave us his signature Freddie smirk and toasted. Strange, right? But that wasn't the strangest thing. The strangest part was that Margaret was second last, and he said yes. Margaret exhaled as if she'd just finished holding her breath for years. It wasn't only relief. It was something else. As if she had just won a long and exhausting battle, and I couldn't figure out why. Following the most recent change in engagement. Nothing dramatic or obvious. It's just small things. She seemed distant and distracted. There were times when she was right next to me, but it felt like I was talking to someone 1,000 miles away. She was constantly checking her phone, always stepping away to make phone calls. When I asked if everything was okay, she simply smiled and said, "Just wedding stress, babe." Maybe she was correct. Maybe I was imagining things, and it was just a coincidence that she and Freddie kept exchanging glances, because there was no reason for me to be concerned. Moving in together was meant to be a fresh start, a new chapter, a home full of love and laughter, happily ever after. People write nonsense in greeting cards. Instead, it began with vomiting. Not quite the romantic housewarming I had in mind. It occurred 3 days after we moved in. Lassie had been acting strangely, pale and tired, running to the bathroom at random times. At first, I assumed it was just stress from moving and wedding planning. This made sense. But then, one morning, as I was preparing coffee, she walked into the kitchen, looking like a ghost, grasping the counter for support. Laughs. "You okay?" I asked. She paused. Her eyes darted around the room as if she were looking for an exit. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke the words that should have made me happy. "I am pregnant." For a brief moment, I just stood there, waiting for my brain to catch up. Pregnant? Holy shit. I should have experienced pure, unadulterated joy. And on the surface, I did. I hugged and kissed her. I told her how happy I was. But something inside me didn't feel right. I wanted children, not because of the news. It was how she said it, as if she were confessing to a crime, like she was afraid of my reaction. But, once again, I pushed it down because love conquers all. Right. Several days later, we invited everyone over for a small housewarming dinner. Parents, Freddie. Basically, the entire dysfunctional crew. I'm not sure what I expected, but when we announced the pregnancy, I certainly didn't expect what came next. My mom let out a gasp. My father was beaming. Margaret nodded approvingly, as if I had finally done something right in her opinion. And Freddie. Freddie turned as white as a damn sheet, his entire face devoid of color. For the first time in his life, he was speechless. No jokes or witty remarks, just silence. He then looked away, as if unable to look at me. He seemed unwilling to look at me. I saw it. My mother saw it. And I swear, for a brief moment, I thought I saw something dark in my mother's eyes. Something suspicious. But she didn't say anything. She just returned to smiling. To congratulate us. To play the role of the ideal mother. After that night, Lassie changed. I mean, she was already acting distant, but now. Now it was even worse. She was constantly on her phone, stepping outside for calls. Arriving home late from work. Going for walks to clear her mind. And every time I asked if she was all right, she gave me the same rehearsed response. It's just pregnancy stuff, babe. You're too worried. Maybe she was correct. Maybe I was overthinking things. But if that were true, why did I keep waking up at night feeling as if my entire world was about to collapse? This occurred at 2:14 a.m. Lassie was out cold and breathing softly beside me, lost in whatever dream world she had escaped to. Then her phone vibrated. Once or twice. The screen came to life in the darkness. And there it was, Freddie. My heart slowed. I stared at the screen, hoping she'd wake up and respond. But she did not even move. And that's when it struck me. Why the hell was my brother calling my fiancée in the middle of the night? I sat frozen, torn between two impossible options. Ignore it. Pretend I've never seen it. Trust Lassie as you would a good, devoted fiancé. Pick up the phone. Look through the messages. Face the truth that was waiting for me. I paused. My hands clenched into fists. And then, before I could stop myself, I reached for the phone and checked my messages. I knew opening that phone would change everything. I simply didn't realize how much at first. It was just messages, long threads of conversation going back months. 6 months, to be exact. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I scrolled through text after text. Some of it was harmless enough at first, inside jokes, late-night chats, and the kind of friendly banter you'd expect from a brother-in-law. But then I saw it, a shift, a message from Freddie. I miss you. Then Lassie responded. I miss you too. There's so much. My breathing slowed. My fingers tightened around the phone. I continued scrolling. Freddie, I hate sneaking around like this. I just want to be with you without the guilt. Lassie, the first understand, baby, I feel the same way. But, Evan, I can't abandon him, not yet, not yet. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The messages kept coming. Mentions of late-night meetings and rushed moments together. When they thought no one else could hear them, they whispered, I love you. Then I saw the message, and my entire body went cold. Freddie. What if it was mine, Lassie? I do not know. I honestly don't. But Evan cannot. No, not now. Perhaps not ever. Freddie, what are we going to do with Lassie? I do not know. We will figure it out. We have to. My vision blurred. This was not real. It could not be real. But it was. Everything made sense now. The distance. The glances. Freddie's ghostly expression when we announced the pregnancy. Margaret had practically shoved me into marriage. She seemed to be trying to hide something my entire life. My love and engagement. My future was a joke. A goddamn joke. I sat in the dark, staring at the glowing screen, my hands trembling. My chest felt too tight, and I breathed in short bursts. The anger grew inside me like a storm, heavy and violent, ready to explode. I wanted her to wake up. I wanted to grab her, shake her, and get answers. But I did not. Because tomorrow was her birthday. The irony almost had me laughing. Tomorrow. I had planned to surprise her with a lovely dinner, a heartfelt toast, and the gold watch. I had bought her a gift to symbolize our future together. But there was no future left. I exhaled slowly, forcing the rage to subside. At least for now. I entered the other room with cold, mechanical movements. I reached for the wrapped gift on my nightstand, ripped off the paper, and took out the expensive watch. It gleamed in the dim lighting. I turned it over in my hands and put it back in its box. Tomorrow morning, Before anything else, I would return it to the store. And this would be the end of it. I was awake before the sun. I didn't sleep much, but it didn't matter. My mind was razor sharp, focused on one goal. And this is the first step. After getting rid of that damn watch, I got into my car and drove to the store, arriving just as the doors were being unlocked. The cashier smiled politely as I handed over the box. "Not the right fit?" she asked. I nearly laughed. "Something like that," I muttered. The refund was processed within minutes. And with that, the final symbol of my love for Lassie was gone. It was time to take out the trash. When I returned home, Lassie was still in bed, curled up under the blankets, as if she didn't care about anything. That changed quickly. I grabbed the nearest suitcase, yanked open the closet, and began shoving her clothes inside. Then I went to the dresser, then the restroom. The sound of drawers slamming finally woke her up. She sat up, groggy and rubbing her eyes. "Evan, babe, what are you doing?" I didn't respond. I just kept moving. My jaw clenched so hard, it could have cracked my teeth. She stretched, oblivious, with a sleepy smile tugging on her lips. "Oh, my God. Are you planning a surprise for my birthday, you weirdo? You know I hate waking up early." Then she noticed the mess. The open suitcase and black garbage bag were stuffed with her belongings. Her smile disappeared. "Evan, what is going on?" I finally came to a halt, turned to face her, and spoke with a steady tone. Controlled. "Are you leaving?" Her face turned pale. "What?" I retrieved her phone from the nightstand and held it up. "I know everything, Lassie. I saw the messages. I know about you and Freddie. I know the baby could be his for a second." She simply stared at me, mouth slightly open and blinking as if I had just spoken in another language. Then, she acted like a true manipulator. She went right into damage control mode. "Evan, please." She swung her legs over the bed and stood up, hands reaching for me. "You are misunderstanding. Those texts mean nothing. It was just. This is just stupid talk. It was not real. Do not lie to me." My voice sounded sharper than I expected. "I know precisely what it was. And now you're going to take your belongings and leave." Her eyes widened. Tears welled up. "Evan, please. I am pregnant. You can't simply throw me out like this." "Pregnant with my brother's child." I shot back. She flinched. "You're not aware of that. And I am not waiting to find out." I turned, grabbed the suitcase, and yanked it from the bed, dragging it to the front door. That's when I overheard it. Car doors slammed outside. Then, voices. Laughter. And just like that, the universe decided that now was the best time for the birthday surprise. Margaret, my parents, and Freddie were all walking toward the house, and I saw them through the window. They had big smiles on their faces, probably carrying some cake and balloons. Perfect. I stepped outside, placed Lacey's suitcase on the porch, and returned inside for another round. Lassie chased after me, grabbing my arm. "Evan, stop. Please do not do this. You have already done it." I snapped and shook her off. The family had arrived by the time I opened the next bag. Margaret's face was frozen in horror, her knuckles white, and she clutched her purse. My mom, Catherine, looked at the mess. Her lips parted as she looked at me and Lassie, but no words came out. And Freddie. Freddie stood there, jaw clenched and hands in his pockets. Eyes darted everywhere except at me. Nobody said anything for a long time. Then Freddie gave a forceful chuckle and turned to face my parents. He said, "Looks like my brother has lost his damn mind. I probably should calm him down." And with that, the final act of this nightmare started. I barely had time to register the stunned expressions of my so-called family when I saw Freddie move, charging toward me like a guilty man caught in the act. And I was prepared for him. "You are a traitor," I roared, my voice piercing the air. "Did you sleep with my wife?" The words had barely left my mouth when Freddie slammed into me, knocking us both to the cold, hard ground. We rolled, fists flying, elbows jabbing, years of tension, resentment, and buried rage finally bursting forth. "Get off me, psycho." Freddie grunted and tried to push me back. "You've ruined my life." I growled and landed a punch square in his jaw. He yelped and fought back, swinging his fists wildly, one of which hit my ribs. I barely felt it. The adrenaline was too high. Margaret screeched in the background, her voice so sharp that it could shatter glass. I knew it. I knew he was a psychopath. It is in his blood. I told you everything. And everyone knew what my real crime was right away. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. Not the affair. No. My crime was simply existing. Margaret had waited for this moment. Meanwhile, Lassie was crying. Big, dramatic sobs. She clung to her mother as if I were a monster who had terrorized her in the night. He attempted to throw me out. "Mom," she wailed. He lost his mind. I do not feel safe here. Safe? She did not feel safe. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. So, what else was I supposed to do? What other reaction was possible when the person who destroyed your life suddenly paints you as the villain in the midst of chaos? I felt strong arms grab me and pull me backwards. My father. Enough. John barked, yanking me away from Freddie. Both of you should stop. Freddie, still panting, scrambled to his feet and wiped a drop of blood from his lip. He looked around, playing the hurt victim, as if he'd practiced it his entire life. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for me to explain myself, as if I were the problem. Fine. I would tell them the truth. I shoved my hands through my hair and exhaled sharply. Lassie and Freddie are liars, I yelled. They have been sneaking around for months, and now what? She is now pregnant. And it might be his child. Silence. Utter a thick silence, followed by soft laughter that grows louder. Margaret. Oh, you're really going crazy now, she sneered, crossing her arms. That is quite a story, Evan. Did the voices in your head tell you this? I gritted my teeth. I saw the messages, Margaret. The first read each one. Which messages? Freddie abruptly interjected, his voice filled with phony confusion. My blood ran hot. Don't pretend you don't know. I snapped and pointed at him. You were concerned that the baby was yours. You were making plans behind my back. Freddie scoffed and shook his head. Wow. Just wow. And I thought we were brothers. That struck a nerve. Brothers. I gave out a hollow laugh. Brothers do not screw each other's fiancés. Margaret gave a gasp. Enough, she yelled, stepping protectively in front of Lassie. If you keep making these insane accusations, Evan, I will take you to court. I'll make sure you end up in a psychiatric ward. That was it. That's when I realized they wouldn't even pretend to take me seriously. They were closing ranks. Freddie, Lassie, Margaret. Even my mother, Catherine. Catherine, who had witnessed Freddie's reaction at the dinner and had suspected something was wrong but refused to admit it. I stared at them all, disgust twisting in my stomach. You've all treated me as an outsider my entire life. I spoke, my voice dangerously calm. And now that I've finally seen the truth, you're trying to make me the crazy one. Margaret snorted. That's because you're crazy. With that, she grabbed Leslie's arm and began leading her to the car. Freddie followed, with my mother trailing behind them, giving me one last pitying look before turning away. Coward. They all got in Margaret's car. They left. They left me there, standing in the ruins of what was supposed to be my life, the only one who remained. John, my father. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets. He stared at the gravel driveway, as if he wanted to be somewhere else. I clenched my fists while still shaking. Do you believe me? I asked. John sighed. Evan, these are serious accusations. Then let us make it official, I replied coldly. I'm hiring a lawyer and need a DNA test. John exhaled through his nose and nodded slowly. Okay. That is fair. Fair? As if anything in the situation had ever been fair. True to my word, I did not just let this go. The day after the chaos, I walked into my lawyer's office, dropped all of the evidence on his desk, and said 6 words. I would like a DNA test ordered. And with that, the war officially began. Margaret, of course, had lost her mind. According to her, I was a dangerous, insane psychopath who required immediate institutionalization. She began telling anyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable, that my orphan genes had finally caught up with me, and that I posed a threat to poor, vulnerable Lassie, Catherine. She was not as vocal about it, but she did what she always did. She excused Freddie, defended Lassie, and framed me as the problem. We don't know if the baby is his, Evan, she said with a patronizing, motherly tone. Even if mistakes were made, don't let your rage destroy this family. Ruin the family that was rich. John, to his credit, did not take sides. He kept his mouth shut and let the situation play out. This was more than I could say about the others. Meanwhile, Freddie was playing the role of the ideal knight in shining armor. When I filed for the DNA test, he stepped up his public support for Lassie, attending her doctor's appointments, and giving speeches about not abandoning a woman in need. It was all a show. Of course. He had spent months sneaking around, and now he was attempting to transform himself into the hero of this story. And Lassie. She leaned into it. She moved into my parents' house, my damn parents' house, and was guarded by Catherine, Freddie, and, of course, Margaret. From where exactly? According to their version of events, I was the aggressive, dangerous ex-fiancé who snapped when things did not go my way. Months have passed. I remained patient. I remained quiet. I let them talk. But I was waiting because I knew the moment Lassie gave birth, I'd have the opportunity to end this for good. Then finally, the day arrived. Lassie gave birth to a baby boy. And then the child was out in the world. I made my move with my lawyer by my side. I returned to court and demanded a legally required DNA test. At this point, even the judge was intrigued. The case had become such a spectacle that he, like me, wanted answers. So, he granted my request. Only the judge suggested Freddie take a DNA test. A test was ordered. And the best part? Freddie agreed. He did not hesitate or panic. He actually took the test. That told me one thing. Freddie firmly believed he was the father. This was not a scared, guilty man attempting to avoid consequences. He was certain of the outcome. Why wouldn't he be? Lassie was practically planning the wedding. Freddie saved the situation. Everyone was just waiting for the results to come in, so they could rub it in my face and portray me as the bitter, jealous ex who tried to ruin a happy couple. And while we waited, Margaret insisted on more. She wanted to be compensated. She wanted the courts to acknowledge that I had been abusive to Lassie, that I had emotionally harmed her, and that she deserved financial compensation. My lawyer, he was a professional. He dragged it out, postponed hearings, filed motions, and kept them bogged down in paperwork while we waited for the real moment of truth. The DNA results. And when they entered, that is when everything changed. I'd been waiting for this moment. The grand reveal, the dramatic conclusion. The moment when the truth would finally strike everyone in the face. When the DNA results arrived, I kept a straight face, but inside, I was smiling like a lunatic. Because I knew. I knew the universe had planned something special for the circus. And boy, did it deliver on the expected outcome. I wasn't the father, there are no surprises there. But then came the real kicker. Freddie was not the father either. Oh, how the mighty fell. I don't even have words to properly describe the collective meltdown that followed. The absolute chaos that must have ensued in my parents' home. The stunned silence, the shouting, the disbelief, the finger points. I wasn't there to witness it firsthand, but I imagine that when Freddie read those results, the air was sucked out of the room, leaving only pure, unfiltered panic. Lassie must have become as white as a ghost. Margaret probably fainted and then awoke to start screaming. Catherine, devastated, furious, humiliated. John, I assume he just sat there, shaking his head, wondering what went wrong. And Freddie, my dear stupid brother, had simply played himself. He had stepped up, ready to be the honorable man, the hero, and to take his rightful place as father, only to discover that he was just as foolish as I was. A few weeks later, something unbelievable occurred. John, Catherine, and Freddie arrived at my apartment. I almost laughed when I saw them standing at my door, obviously uncomfortable. John was the first to speak. Evan, we were mistaken. Catherine nodded, as if she'd swallowed nails. We should have believed Lassie. She was dishonest, manipulative, and reckless. Freddie, the prize idiot, actually attempted to turn it into a bonding experience. I guess I saved you from a terrible wife. He even had the audacity to chuckle. I simply stared at him, my expression blank. Save me. Save me. This man, who had spent months sneaking around with my fiancée and planning a life with her behind my back, was now claiming to be my savior. I didn't bother responding. They were all desperate to erase their own guilt, rewrite history, and pretend they were the victims. But I saw them as they were. Now, I was not interested in second chances. I appreciate the apology, I said evenly, but I do not need it. John sighed and nodded, accepting my decision as a man. Catherine seemed to want to argue, but she didn't. Freddie. He simply stood there, shifting awkwardly, as if expecting me to hug him or something. I stepped back inside and shut the door. It was the last time I saw them. I tried to forget everything and get on with my life. I had no contact with my family and informed them that I was now on my own. Life has become more peaceful. I started an online business, which I never imagined I'd do, but it turns out I have a talent for it. Business is slow but growing. I'm learning, adapting, and creating something for myself. And, well, there is a girl. She lives next door, sweet, kind, down to earth. No theatrics or games. Just a warm smile and genuine kindness. I asked her out the other day. She said yes. And for the first time in a long time, life feels right again. Oh, right. You are probably wondering. So who the hell fathered Lassie's child? So, through some mutual acquaintances, I eventually got an answer. It turns out that our dear Lassie participated in a small extracurricular activity with a coworker. It was just a dumb, thoughtless fling. 1 or 2 nights, at most. Apparently, logic wasn't her strong suit. Here's the kicker, Margaret knew. That's why she was so eager to find a husband for her daughter. She wasn't pushing me to marry out of love or tradition. She was desperately attempting to transfer Lassie to the nearest available idiot first. That idiot was meant to be me. When that fell apart, she turned to Freddie. Who, to be honest, he never made a bad decision that he regretted. So, let's break it down. Lassie was dating me, messing around with my brother, and having a few nights out with a coworker. Or something in between. A true multitasker. Despite all her scheming and deception, she managed to screw herself over. Lassie was so eager for adventure, so reckless, that she completely lost control of her own game. And, honestly, I would be upset if it weren't so damn funny. Here's the next story. Nancy Moore, 28, worked in the accounting department of an insurance company. At 3 p.m., she received a call from her husband, Jack. Hello, Nancy. Are you working beyond your normal hours today? Nancy sensed something wrong in Jack's voice. Are you all right, Jack? What is the matter? Nancy asked. She was a little worried. I'm good. I arrived home early today and wanted to know if you'd be here by 5:30. There is no overtime today. Would you like me to leave now, Nancy asked. Don't worry. In the meantime, I will rest. See you later. Jack hung up. Nancy was certain that something was bothering Jack. She walked directly to her manager's office. Nancy, we'll be looking at a few files during overtime today. Alan Perkins, with a big smile, reminded Nancy before she could say anything. Alan, I'm here to request permission to leave early. Are you okay? Alan frowned. I am fine. It's Jack. I believe he is not well. He has just called me from home. Do what you have to do, Nancy. We'll catch up next time. She looked at her manager and nodded. Nancy walked into the house and discovered Jack dozing on the couch. I'm home, darling. She awoke him. Do you feel well? Yes, certainly. Jack sat up. I'm a little tired. You are early. He glanced at his wristwatch. I left right after you called. I know you, Jack. More. Something is bothering you. Nancy sat by his side on the couch. We need to talk. Jack turned his head and looked Nancy in the eye. Oh, God. Nancy was thinking. Please, I do not want any bad news. She inhaled deeply. What do you want to talk about, Jack? She inquired with fear. I'm not sure where to start. You will agree that we have recently drifted apart. Nancy frowned. Nancy, I will be direct with you. I have fallen out of love with you. What? Nancy jerked. Honey, we are a married couple with many goals for the future. You are aware that I will be off the pill in a few months, as we previously discussed. We plan to start a family by the beginning of next year. We'll buy our own home, and I know Nancy. Jack cut in. I've met someone. Someone. Nancy held back her tears. Yes, a young woman and I are in love. I apologize, but there is no easy way to tell you this. But, Jack, how could you do this to me? To us? Nancy was still trying to process what was happening. We've known each other for 5 years and have been married for 3. The past 6 months. You've changed, and you've been neglecting me. Jack, I have never neglected you. I'm always here for you. You began with weekly overtime, occasionally twice a week, but, Jack, I'm doing it for us. We need the money to purchase a home. Then you began your weekly girls' night out with your coworkers. Then, every Saturday, you went shopping for a few hours. I work really hard, Jack. I need some time for myself. Have you ever thought of me? Jack almost shouted. Instead, we could have gone on a weekly date with your colleagues. On Saturdays, we could have gone shopping together. Nancy looked at the floor. She realized what she had done. Please, Jack, I love you. We can work things out. Nancy, when I discussed these issues with you 3 months ago, you were angry. You even raised your voice to me. Do you remember? I sincerely apologize if I hurt you, Jack. I didn't see it this way 3 months ago. Now I realize I was only looking out for myself. Please, Jack, give me another chance. Let us work on our marriage. 3 months ago I was completely down. During my lunch break, she came to sit by my side. She works for another department. She noticed me crying. She befriended me, and a few days later, she inquired about what was wrong in my life. I told her everything. I needed to express my pain to someone, and she became a shoulder to cry on. Is she the one? Yes, Nancy. She's the one. And we gradually became emotionally attracted. We finally fell in love. What is her name? What does she do? Nancy asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her name and what she does do not matter. It's better you don't know her. Have you two been intimate? Nancy asked. Yes. Nancy, I apologize. How could you? Nancy yelled. Nancy, tell me when we last made love. Jack asked. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Nancy tried hard to remember. It was 1 month ago, and there was no lovemaking. We only had a short time because you were so tired over the last 6 months. You've always been tired. We were only intimate 3 times. But, Jack, you should have asked. You should have started something, Nancy. Intimacy is an integral part of a couple's life. It comes naturally. There's nothing to ask. Jack responded. So, what have you been getting from her? Wasn't I giving you? Yes. More than that, Jack responded. Nancy frowned. She does things you have always declined to do. Jack continued, but I had no idea you liked it. Nancy attempted to protest. Nancy sobbed. Then she's better than me in bed. I'd rather say I get more pleasure from her. She is always looking for sensitive spots on my body. Jack responded. I'm sorry, Jack. If I couldn't be enough for you in bed, you'll be served tomorrow. I filed for irreconcilable differences. Today, I took 50% of our savings. We'll keep our respective cars. We're both working. There is no question about alimony. The lease for this house expires in a few months. I will stay here tonight. I'll move to the guest room. It's best to call your parents and explain everything. I assume you will relocate to their home. Will she live here in the meantime? Nancy asked. No, she will not. She does not want to touch your belongings, our furniture, or anything else that reminds me of you and our time together. In fact, we have already looked for an apartment at the new complex, Lakeshore Heights. We chose one with a balcony overlooking the lake. The building will be completed in a few months, which is fortunate for me because I will need to vacate almost simultaneously. Lakeside Heights. Nancy was thinking. That was where I intended to relocate, and hoped to persuade Jack to buy an apartment. Why don't you move in with her? Nancy asked. She has a roommate in her 2-bedroom apartment, and they initially established a rule not to bring in any third party. As a result, we always had to reserve a motel room. We sometimes did it in my car's back seat. Jack, I love you, and want to spend the rest of my life with you. Growing old with you. Is there any way we can work on our marriage? I'll close my eyes on your 3-month getaway with this girl. I'll never bring this up. I promise to give you everything she is giving you. I will never refuse you anything. We can seek counseling. Unfortunately, Nancy, I've already made my decision. Jack stood up. I'm going to take my things to the guest room and take a quick nap. What happens if I refuse the divorce? I will fight it. Nancy shouted. You will spend a lot of money on legal fees, and in the worst-case scenario, we will simply resign from our jobs and relocate far away together. I will remain married to you, but not live with you. You cannot do that. It is not legal. It is indeed. There is no law in this country that requires me to stay here with you. Jack walked away. Nancy cried. Later, she called her parents to briefly explain the situation. They sat by her side in the living room for half an hour. How could he have done this to you? John, Nancy's father, was furious. He cannot throw away 3 years of marriage because you failed to care for him for a few months. Mary shouted. He should have spoken with you and addressed any concerns. It was my fault, Mother. Nancy dried her tears. I had been neglecting him, which pushed him into the arms of that woman. He should understand that you were doing all of this for the two of you. And, due to the stress of your job, you required some personal time. John stated that he would like to speak with him. Please call him down here. No, Dad. He is taking a rest. You can talk to him in a few days, once you have calmed down. Will you pack your things and join us? We'll help you. Mary asked her daughter. I'll stay. Nancy said this as her parents sat in confusion. I'll try to reconquer him. Are you certain? Both parents asked at the same time. Yes, Nancy responded. Okay, we're leaving now. However, if you have any questions, please call us. Understand? Yes, Dad. Nancy went to her room and cried herself to sleep in the middle of the night. She awoke and went down to the kitchen. She discovered an empty pizza box near the trash can. He did not wake me up for dinner. He ordered takeout only for himself. Nancy thought she had drunk a glass of water and returned to bed. When she walked out of her room the next morning, she heard the garage door close and Jack's car speed away. She prepared and drove to work before lunchtime. Alan Perkins called Nancy into his office. Since this morning, you've been acting strange. It appears that you have been crying. Is everything okay at home? He asked. Jack is divorcing me. What? How does he do it? He found somebody else. He's in love with her. One sincerely apologize, Alan replied. He claimed that I had been neglecting him. Which is correct. Nancy bowed her head. He found solace in a young woman working for the same company. Do you need some time off? You can take as many days off as you like. I'll let you know when I need them. For the time being, I would prefer to come to work, but there will not be any. Staying late. I understand, Alan responded. That afternoon, Nancy prepared Jack's favorite meal. When he got home, the kitchen was full of the aroma. He went directly to his room without saying anything to Nancy. Later, he came down to clean and change. I have a date with her, he informed Nancy. I had cooked for both of us, and Nancy was almost in tears. Better not cook for me from now on. We'll do our things separately. As you wish, Jack. I am not sure what time I will be back. Jack walked towards the door. I love you, Jack. She shed tears. Jack closed the door behind him. When Nancy returned home the next afternoon, Jack was already waiting for her. Nancy put her handbag away and went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. The doorbell rang. It's for you, Jack explained without looking at Nancy. She frowned and went to open the door for a man in a suit. Are you Mrs. Nancy Moore? Yes, I am. You've been served. He handed her the manila envelope. Have a lovely evening, ma'am. The man turned to walk away. Nancy almost collapsed as she took the envelope. She had to lean against a wall. Please sign it, and let's get on with our lives. Jack sat at her back. Nancy turned around and looked directly into Jack's eyes. So I have been neglecting you for 6 months, and you have forgotten all of our good times together. I told you I'd change, and I have. I'll be the best wife and friend. Please, I beg you, Jack. I'm only asking for another chance. This was a mistake. Can't you forgive me for a mistake? So, how can it be a mistake when you had everything planned out beforehand? It's not what you think, Nancy said. You tell me what to think about our enjoyable time together. Believe me when I say that you were the one who ended it. The time I am spending with her right now is far superior to the time we spent together previously. Simply sign the papers, will you? Jack went to his room. Nancy sat down and opened the envelope, her hands trembling. She reviewed the documents and signed them. Later, when she returned to her room, she could hear Jack talking on the phone. His door was open. Yes, baby, he answered. She's been served this afternoon. The countdown has begun. I love you too, sweetheart. You will discontinue the pill right now. That is a good idea. We can marry right after the divorce, despite your swollen belly. You'll look fantastic in your wedding gown. Nancy entered her room and closed the door behind her. I wish I could go back in time, she told herself. The next day, she awoke early. She left the papers on the kitchen table and drove to work. There, she called her parents and informed them of her situation. They asked her to pack up and leave the house. She simply replied that she would. Later, she informed Alan Perkins that she signed the divorce papers. It will be very difficult for you, he said. You cannot imagine. Nancy sobbed. It feels like the entire world has crashed on me. You should not let yourself be brought down. You're still young. Maybe life has other good things planned for you in the future. Jack was my future, and I messed up. Can we go get a drink after work to relieve some stress? Alan Perkins asked. It all began with a drink after work. Remember? Nancy turned around and approached her workstation. As the days passed, Jack would return home late from eating out. He would prepare himself a sandwich. He'd do his own shopping. Nancy became more provocative at home, walking in shorts and a tank top. She would occasionally enter the kitchen wrapped in a towel. When Jack was present, she played the music and songs that he enjoyed the most. She would sometimes form a band in front of him. She would always wait for him in the evening and try to start a conversation. He would sometimes refuse, claiming exhaustion and retreating to his room. But he would also sit down and listen to her. She never spoke about the other woman. She always made it a point to relive their old memories together, where she could see glitter in his eyes and a smile on his lips. But then he would change the subject. On weekends, Jack would mow the lawn or do something else to keep himself busy while avoiding Nancy. In the evening, he would go out alone and return very late. One Friday, she called Jack and asked for a date. That evening, there would be dinner and dancing. He accepted. She was very happy. Even her coworkers noticed the change in her. She arrived home early and prepared herself. She applied nail polish and chose the dress that Jack liked best. A turquoise dress with short sleeves and pleats. She carefully applied her hair and makeup. They had a lovely dinner. They discussed everything except their actual situation. At one point, Nancy felt as if everything that had happened in the previous 6 months had been a nightmare, and she simply awoke, putting everything behind her, as if they were still the madly in love couple they once were. After dinner, they took their drinks and sat near the dance floor. A man approached Nancy and invited her to dance. She looked at Jack. The latter shrugged his shoulders. She politely declined, and he walked away. Will you do this dance with me? She asked Jack without speaking. Jack stood up, grabbed her hand, and pulled her to the dance floor. They danced 5 songs in a row. They moved to the rhythm of the music. As they returned to their table, a slow song began without a word. Nancy dragged Jack to the dance floor, clung to him, and rested her head on his shoulder. He could feel her breath on his neck for several weeks. She wanted to hug him, feel his body against her, and make passionate love with him. She didn't care who was watching or what they were thinking. She was with her man and could do whatever she pleased. She gave a sudden push toward Jack's body. "Let's go home," Jack whispered into her ear. Nancy smiled. On the way back, Jack concentrated on his driving while Nancy sat and hummed a few songs. They just danced together. Nancy dashed into her room after Jack had parked his car in the garage, leaving the door open. She undressed and lay naked on the bed, waiting for her husband. Jack walked down the hallway, passing Nancy's room without turning to look at her, and making his way to the guest room. Nancy lay on the bed, shocked, trying to figure out what had happened. She jumped and dashed to the guest room. She opened the door without knocking. Jack was shirtless. "What happened? Why don't you take your wife? It's been weeks since you have touched me. And I am extremely excited. I know you are too." As I felt on the dance floor. "Nancy, we're getting divorced. We cannot be intimate. We're still married, and I'm still your wife. Please, honey." She approached Jack and attempted to hug him. He ignored her and sat on his bed. "Take what's yours, Jack. Do what you want with me. I will never refuse you anything." She sat at his sides and attempted to kiss him on the lips. He turned his face away, and she grabbed his cheek. "Please, Jack, do not leave me. Do not divorce me. I love you. I simply ask for your forgiveness. I am confident we can work it out. Let's just forget about those stupid 6 months like they never happened. You can do it, Jack. Because you do not hate me." "It's a little too late, Nancy," Jack responded. "It is never too late, Jack. Your weakness has drawn you to someone else. You were vulnerable due to the situation I created. I was stupid, egotistical, and selfish. I've learned from my mistakes, and I promise it won't happen again. I will be the best wife on this planet." Jack did not say anything. He had a distant expression in his eyes. Nancy knelt in front of him, taking both of his hands. "I will be your girl, Jack. Your wish is my command. You are free to hit me. Beat me every day. Punish me for what I have done to you. Humiliate me. But, Jack, be my husband until death does us part," she cried. "I cannot." Jack looked directly into her eyes. "But why can't you?" Nancy asked. "Because I can't cheat on her." Nancy stood up, angry. Her, she yelled. "So, who is she? Can't you see she's a homewrecker? The cheating woman seduced you and exploited your vulnerability. She knew you were married, but it didn't stop her. Seduce you? How do you know she's not going to cheat on you? She will not. Whatever you said you would do. She will be more than that. Resigned." She walked up to the door and came to a stop. "I am tired. Jack, this divorce is eating me up. First thing tomorrow, I'll call my parents to come help me pack." She spoke without turning to face him. "I sincerely apologize for my mistakes. Please forgive me for causing you pain. I wish I were wiser. I hope you have a happy life with your future wife." She walked away to her room, head bowed. The next morning, Nancy's parents arrived early. "You have dark circles under your eyes. Again, sleepless nights?" Mary asked. Nancy didn't respond. John told his daughter, "You should have left this place the first time he dropped the device on you." "I know, Dad, but I wanted to win him back. Just forget him. There are plenty of young men out there who will fall for you in an instant." Mary spit. "I have a few words for this jerk. Wake him up." John became angry. "Please leave him alone. You'll waste your time." "Dad. Mom, please come help me with the packing. Did you want to talk?" Jack walked down the steps. "Yes. Jerk." John turned red with rage. "You are a true son of a blimp." "Dad, please." Nancy shakes her head. "I need to tell this worthless man exactly how I feel about him." John turned towards Jack. "Due to your male ego, you cannot accept that your wife should have a private moment for herself. She's been working very hard. Overtime following overtime. And for what? To bring in extra money so that both of you can purchase a home as soon as possible. Maybe she went a little overboard with her girls' night out, or Saturday shopping. But she needed them to chill. She admits she made a mistake, and asks for forgiveness. So, what do? You cheat on her with the first woman you meet, then have her served." Jack kept quiet and looked John in the eyes. Nancy grabbed her father's arm, and attempted to pull him upstairs to her room. "Nancy, I knew he wouldn't be a good fit for you from the moment you brought him home. You were so deeply in love that I kept quiet and prayed that I was mistaken. Come on, John." Mary soothed. "We have more important things to do." Both mother and daughter took John by the arm and led him upstairs. Jack opened the door and discovered John's van in the center of the driveway. He opted to walk 2 blocks to the nearest coffee shop. The case was scheduled to be heard 3 months later, on the eve. Nancy took a few days off work. With her parents, They went to spend some time in their cabin. She wanted to get away from the crowd. She knew the divorce would be granted by the judge, and she didn't want to be present in court. She did not want to be disturbed by friends or colleagues. She asked her parents to turn off their cell phones. The next morning, at 11:00, there was a knock on the door. All three looked at each other. Nobody knew where they were. Mary opened the door for Jack, who stood at the entrance. "I need to tell Nancy a few things, and it would be helpful if you were present," Jack told Mary. "How dare you come here? Jerk! Get out of my property!" John shouted. Nancy remained quiet. She didn't know what to do. "I tried calling everywhere, and even came to your house. I presume you have all your cell phones shut down." Jack addressed Mary and ignored John. "I knew you'd all be here." He was still standing by the door. "What do you want, Jack?" Nancy mustered the courage to ask. At 10 a.m., the judge granted the divorce. "We are single as of today," Jack answered. "You came all the way here just to tell my daughter that you were single again." Mary raised her voice. "Please move away before I break your jaw." John pointed a finger at Jack. "My daughter has been suffering for the past 3 months, and you've come here today to put the final nail in the coffin. I've been suffering for 6 months, and no one has noticed," Jack yelled. Everyone was taken aback by Jack's sudden eruption of rage. He pushed Mary aside and entered the cabin. There was no she, her, or female colleague. Jack barked at Nancy. "I've never cheated on you, Nancy. It was a setup." "But why?" Nancy was stunned by Jack's revelation. John and Mary stood still. "Why can you confirm this?" Jack asked. "What are you confirming?" Nancy asked. "You've never cheated on me." Nancy suddenly felt her feet weaken. She couldn't stand. She sprawled onto her chair. Jack turned to face his ex-laws. "This woman has been cheating on her boss, Alan Perkins, for the past 6 months." The room fell silent abruptly. John and Mary couldn't believe what they heard. They looked at their daughter. She couldn't face them. She started crying. "All those overtimes. Ladies' night out or Saturday shopping. Did you cheat on him in motels, or in the back seat of his car? I had a private investigator follow you. And I have DVDs. Lots of them. Please, darling," John pleaded with Nancy. "Tell me this isn't true and that he's lying." Nancy cried, saying, "I am sorry. I could have divorced you with all of the evidence I had, but I wanted to make you suffer. I want you to feel what I felt. To help you understand what it means to be cheated. I wanted you to be hurt. To feel pain, to bleed." Jack spit. "You did things with him that you have always refused me. You understand what I am talking about. You let him belittle me while he was with you. You gave him what belonged to me. You disrespected me. You did not have time for me. But you were spending every spare moment with him. You are the most unfaithful woman I know." Nancy cried louder. Mary hugged her husband tightly. "Put your phone on. You should receive hundreds of calls from work. And Alan." Nancy frowned. She took her cell phone and turned it on. She had several missed calls and messages. "We were still married as of yesterday. My lawyer filed a lawsuit against both the insurance company and Alan Perkins. Affectional alienation still exists in our state." "Oh no," Nancy cried, "according to my attorney. We can earn up to 7 figures. One positive outcome of your cheating is that you will bring me some money." Jack laughed. Nancy glanced at her phone. The missed calls came from her employer and Alan Perkins. She read the last text message. It was from the Human Resources Department, and they asked her to call as soon as possible. She scrolled down to see Alan's message. He swore. "By the way, I contacted Alan's wife yesterday and handed her a set of DVDs. She threatened to send him to the cleaners and make it difficult for him to see his 2 children. She even offered me revenge. Love. I'm meeting her tonight because I'm single now." "He has a family. Why did you do that?" Nancy asked. "I did nothing. When you first began cheating, you destroyed their home. Do you know what's funny? I plan to move in with Mrs. Perkins for a while to rub it in Alan's face, as he will still have to pay the mortgage while I am with his wife. It's best if you leave now, Jack," John advised. "Right now, we will have to deal with our own misery. I am not finished yet." Jack roared at John, before turning to face Nancy. "I am confident that you have already been fired by the insurance company. Alan, too. He loved you after working hours in your workplace, and claimed overtime for you. I don't think he'll find another job in the financial sector." Nancy couldn't face Jack. She simply shook her head. "By the way, last month I misplaced a bag containing a set of your well-known DVDs. And this morning, I discovered that they had been uploaded online with your name, phone number, and address." Jack smirked. "Don't worry about getting fired. I am confident you will land a job in the adult industry." "Oh, my God." Nancy passed out. "Now I'm finished." Jack approached the door and turned to face John. "The jerk wants nothing to do with you all, and never wants to see you again. The unfaithful wife may rot in hell. He left the cabin. And so we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected? Or was there an unexpected twist? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And let's get a conversation started.